You know, it seemed to me that once they started an intervention, they all just kind of, it was a domino effect.
The whole thing is like a big snowball effect.
In the hospital, you're not allowed to have very long labors. So if you're not dilating rapidly, which you're likely not to do if you get an epidural early in labor, you will be given Pitocin. They'll put the Pitocin in the IV. It will flow into your veins. Pitocin makes contractions longer and stronger and closer together. So then the pain of labor is much worse. So you go with that for a while because you have the epidural, but eventually the pain of the contractions is overwhelming the epidural. You need to up the epidural, and then labor slows down more because of that, so then you need more Pitocin. Now you're not feeling the pain of the extra Pitocin because you've got the epidural, but your baby is getting compressed blood and oxygen supply because Pitocin contractions last so long and are so strong, the blood and oxygen flow to the baby is compromised. So then the baby's likely to go into distress, and then you're sent off for an emergency cesarean from a baby in distress from contractions induced by the Pitocin, which was necessitated by the epidural.
Step by step, one intervention leads to a series of interventions. And the net result is the mother finally ends up with a cesarean, and everybody says, thank God we were able to do all those interventions to save your baby. The fact of the matter is, if they didn't start the cascade of interventions, none of that would have been necessary.
There is clearly an association with induction of labor and cesarean delivery.
Don't have the information. When you look at obstetrics in general, there's been a series of very intense interventions that physicians have been doing day in and day out to millions of women, and there's not a medically justified reason for doing those things. Even common sense. I mean, the idea of lying down with your legs up being the most comfortable or logical position to give birth, you know.
The more you can move through your labor and the more you can move through the contractions, they don't seem as intense. To lay still, it's like, who would want to do this? It's like, I just want to get out off this bed and move my hips.
The lithotomy position is the most physiologically dysfunctional position ever invented for birth because putting the mother flat on her back literally makes the pelvis smaller, makes it much more difficult for the woman to use her stomach muscles to push, and therefore makes it much more likely that an episiotomy will be cut or forceps will be used or the vacuum extractor will be used.
Our death rate is higher than some third world countries. We have areas in the United States where it's sky high.
People in our culture spend more time and effort researching to buy a stereo system, a car, probably a camera, than they do checking out what their choices are for birth.
Today in the United States, we know that there is serious increase in minimal neurological problems in children and in attention deficit disorders, in autism. All of these things are increasing at the same period of time that we're increasing all these obstetric interventions. And we don't know. And maybe next year or next decade, we'll discover to our horror that what happens at birth is very important to the future development of that child.
One of the things to remember is Pitocin is a synthetic version of oxytocin that you put intravenously in a woman when she's in labor. However, Pitocin doesn't act as natural oxytocin would in the brain. So there's all kinds of things about modern medical interventions. Sometimes they need to be done, but they also inhibit this natural maternal aggression to protect the baby and to nourish the baby right after birth that is normal for mammals and for human moms.
My life has been roses, and roses grow wild. My life's been a Mona Lisa, you know that something is wrong. I'm feeling so small, but it's nothing at all. My life has been sunshine, and sunshine ain't bad. My life's been a rainbow with colors so mad, and I don't know why it didn't believe me when I said something is wrong. I'm feeling so small, but it's nothing at all.